The echo under glass stars didn't hum anymore. Once, the galaxy had sung, strange pulses of light and energy dancing between planets, carried by voices old as the void. Now, silence. It stretched like cold metal across forgotten systems, where old ships drifted with empty hulls and half-written data logs. In one of those systems, beneath the fractured rings of a gas giant, a research vessel shaped like a dying flower floated in a field of debris. Inside that ship, a single human stood barefoot on the cold floor. His name was Elian. No rank, no family left, no crew either. Not anymore. Just him and the message. His hands trembled as he replayed the transmission again, the one that had brought him to the edges of charted space. The voice was distorted, layered with static and alien harmonics, but the final word had pierced through it all. Clear, raw, home. Elian had heard it in his sleep. For weeks, long before the message was found, he had drawn its waveform with chalk on the metal wall beside his bed. He had whispered it without understanding why. And when the Galactic Council dismissed the signal as cosmic noise, he resigned, took the last vessel no one wanted, and left. But the closer he got, the heavier the silence became. Not empty, full, like a breath held for too long. The station appeared beneath a shroud of icy clouds, orbiting a pale dwarf star, ancient, not in construction, but in soul. The architecture was not human, too fluid, too soft around the edges, as if grown, not built. And yet, it recognized him. Voice confirmed, the station said as his ship approached. Welcome. Speaker. Elian felt the word wrap around him, like warmth. Speaker. No one had called him anything but you and yours. He docked. The ship hissed as it let go of him, almost grateful to be free of its duty. Elian stepped into the unknown, guided only by light that pulsed softly in the floor. Golden veins, like roots beneath glass. Inside, the station breathed. Not mechanically, not artificially. It was slow, gentle, like the inhale of something asleep, but dreaming. Every door opened before he touched it. Every corridor curved, not for efficiency, but comfort. It felt like walking through a memory someone loved too much to let go of. Then he found the room. Round, wide, with a daze in the center. Hovering above it, a crystal, the size of a human heart. It pulsed in rhythm with Elian's own. He stepped forward. The light grew brighter. Speaker, a voice echoed. It was not male or female. It felt like music turned into thought. Why am I here? Elian asked. His voice cracked. Because you remember, it said. Because your kind listens. Elian blinked. What do you mean, listens? The crystal pulsed again. Around him, the walls changed. They shimmered, showing images that twisted his stomach and filled his eyes with tears. Planets burning, children hiding, civilizations begging the stars for help that never came. We once believed knowledge was enough, the voice said. But in silence, truth dies. Elian dropped to his knees. Why me? He whispered. The voice softened. Because you sang to the void when it sang no more. Then it showed him something else. A memory not his own, a being, tall and radiant, falling to its knees before a human child who held nothing but a broken toy. The child reached out, not with fear, but with kindness, a gesture simple, ancient, powerful. Your kind, the voice said, has always carried the fire. You forget it often, but you never lose it. Elian could not speak. Something inside him cracked open, a grief he didn't know he carried. And with it came something older than grief. Hope. The crystal dimmed. This station will wake, the voice said, but it will only follow one who still believes. Elian stood, shakily, but he stood. Behind him, the light of the galaxy flickered once, like something breathing in the dark, realizing it had not been alone and far away, across systems forgotten and broken. Old machines stirred, listening, remembering. Asterisk. When the silent-stirred station began to shift the moment Elian stood tall. Beneath his feet, the golden lines in the floor brightened. No longer faint pulses, but living streams of energy, flowing. Like liquid thought, the walls responded, not with sound, but with a feeling, warmth, acceptance. The station had been waiting, not for orders, not for a signal. It had been waiting for someone who felt Eli and took a slow breath. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something like rain on stone, impossible in space. But the scent wrapped around his memories like an old lullaby. The place wasn't just mechanical. It was remembering with him. You said this station will wake, Elian whispered. What does that mean? The voice answered. Not from the crystal this time, but from everywhere. It echoed in the walls, beneath his skin, inside his bones. To wake is to become what we were again, it said. But we cannot wake without the presence of one who still dreams. Elian didn't understand that completely, but the truth in it made his heart ache. In the years since humanity joined the galactic community, they had brought tools, knowledge, even empathy, but they'd stopped dreaming. The rest of the galaxy had, too. Logic had replaced wonder. Rules had replaced heart. A door slid open behind him, without a sound, without a mechanism. It simply opened, and beyond it, a hallway waited, lit with soft blue light. Something about it pulled at Elian like a melody half heard. He walked, not quickly. Each step felt like a promised dot as he moved through the corridor. The walls shimmered, again, showing him pieces of history like glass panels playing emotions instead of images. An alien mother singing to her child in a cradle made of living vines. A human soldier weeping silently beside the wreckage of a peace envoy he couldn't save. The child, maybe not even human, laughing with his hands buried in golden soil. Every memory pulsed with color and feeling, but all of them ended the same way, in silence, in loss, in forgetting. At the end of the corridor stood a massive archway. It led to what looked like an observation chamber, open to the stars. But there was no glass, no shield, just a wall of humming energy, allowing the cosmos to shimmer in full glory. Elian stepped through, and there she stood, not human, not fully alien either, tall, draped in robes that shifted color with her breath, skin pale like pearl, eyes like galaxies, moving endless. She turned slowly to face him. You came, she said softly. Elian froze. Who are you? Her eyes studied him, not harshly, not with judgment, but as if trying to remember a name long forgotten. I am the guardian of memory, she replied. But my name was once Inari. Elian stepped closer. How long have you been here? She tilted her head. Longer than your species has had written language. His breath caught. Then why am I the first to reach you? He asked. Nari smiled. It was a sad smile, the kind that held centuries of heartbreak behind its gentleness. Because you listened. They sat in silence for a while. No words. Just stars and breath and the soft hum of the station's awakening. Finally, she spoke. This station, this place, it was built by an alliance that no longer exists. Before wars, before greed, it was made to keep the memory of kindness alive. But when the galaxy stopped believing in such things, we went quiet. She paused, looking at the stars. We thought maybe kindness had gone extinct. Elian's throat tightened. It didn't. It's just buried sometimes. Inari looked at him again. You still carry it, all of you, the humans. He shook his head. Not all of us. We hurt each other. We destroy things. We lie. And still, she said gently, using to the silence. Suddenly, the air changed. The station pulsed once, lights dimmed for a second, then steadied. Inari stood. They are coming. Elian stood with her. Who others? She said. They heard your arrival. They felt the station's pulse. And not all who come will understand. Not all come with peace. A cold fear crept into Elian's chest. So what do we do? He asked. I turned to face him, her eyes glowing brighter now, like stars waking after a long winter. We remember who we are, and we remind them. And in that moment, Elian realized something. This wasn't just a forgotten station. It was a lighthouse. And now, it was shining again. The ones who forgot warning came not in words, but in a shift in gravity. The air thickened. The hum beneath the floor changed pitch, just enough to make Elian's ears ring and his stomach tighten. Inari didn't speak. She only raised her hand and closed her eyes. Immediately, the walls around them darkened. The soft blue of the station's core faded into a dull gray, and the glowing veins along the floor dimmed like they were hiding. They're near, she said, and they do not carry peace. Elian stared out into the stars. His breath caught. Emerging from the distant shadows of the gas giant's rings were 3 ships, tall, sharp, blacker than space itself. They moved with precision, no lights, no markings, only silence, like predators who didn't need to roar. Who are they? He asked. They call themselves the Varen, Inari said. Long ago, they were our students. Now, they are our shadows. Elian's hands curled into fists. Why are they here? Inari opened her eyes. Because we woke. And because you are here. The Varen were not invaders in the usual way. They didn't conquer with fire. They erased knowledge, stories, connections. They believed memory was weakness, that survival demanded emptiness, emotion was a flaw, culture a sickness. To them, the station was a disease that needed purging, and alien a symptom. Can't we talk to them? Alien asked. You can try, Inari said, but they will only hear silence where your heart speaks. Still, Alien stepped forward, toward the outer ring, toward the communications chamber, a sphere suspended in energy, capable of transmitting thoughts, not just words. Inari followed, but she watched him with something more than worry. She watched him with wonder. As Alien entered the chamber, the holographic controls came alive. They responded not just to his hands, but to his pulse, his breath, even his fear. The station had bonded to him, not as a master, but as a mirror, and when he reached out to transmit, the chamber didn't ask for a code. It asked for a feeling, hope. He whispered. The word became light, and the signal went out. On the bridge of the lead Varan ship, 3 tall figures stood in silence. Their bodies were hidden beneath armor that shimmered like liquid obsidian. One of them, taller than the rest, stepped toward the console. A faint sound echoed through the chamber. A single word. Hope. The figure froze. Terminate the signal. Another hissed. But the tall one didn't move. Instead, he leaned closer to the console. Somewhere beneath that armor, something had flickered. Back on the station, Inari watched the energy web shift again. It was subtle, but she felt it. One of the Varan had paused, not fully, but enough to change the pattern of their approach. You reached one, she said quietly. Alien was trembling. I don't know how. I meant it. Inari stepped closer, her voice gentler now. That is how truth moves, not through strength, but sincerity. Before Alien could respond, the chamber trembled. Incoming energy spike, the station whispered. Outside, a beam of light sliced through the space above the station, a warning shot. The Varan had made their choice. They will breach us. In minutes, Inari said. Alien's chest tightened. That we fight. Inari turned toward him. No, we remember. She led him deep into the station's heart, a place where machines no longer functioned by code, but by memory, where walls held feelings, not data. There, Inari pressed her hand against a crystal embedded in the wall. This, she said, is the archive of all that was kind. The voices of those who healed, who gave, who forgave. They have been waiting. The crystal glowed faintly, but it needs a carrier, Inari whispered. Alien stepped forward. Me, if you accept, she said, you won't just hold memory, you'll become it. Alien hesitated. What will that do? She looked into his eyes. It will make you more than human, and also the most human thing in the galaxy. Outside, the Varan readied their final strike. The ships aligned. Energy pulsed in cold waves. Inside, Alien placed his hand on the crystal, and the past rushed into him. Not in pain, not in fire. But in light. Memories of strangers holding hands across species. Songs sung in languages lost to time. A dying alien, whispering thanks to a human nurse who stayed by his side. A child who gave up her food to a passing traveler. A soldier who dropped his weapon to carry a wounded enemy. Alien cried, not because it hurt, but because it healed. And when he opened his eyes, he wasn't alone. He stood in the chamber, surrounded by figures made of memory and light. Human, alien, old, young, not ghosts, echoes, guardians of kindness, risen from the forgotten corners of history. Nari smiled. Now, she said softly, we showed them who we were, and still are. And outside, one of the Varan ships hesitated. Then, slowly, it turned away. Echoes that do not fat. The first Varan ship turned away without a word. No broadcast, no sign of surrender. It simply broke formation, its engines dimming to low burn, drifting slowly out of range like a shadow losing interest. On the bridge of the station, Alien stood surrounded by light, not artificial. Not technological, but something living. The echoes, memories of people who had once loved, sacrificed, forgave, hovered around him like a constellation of forgotten goodness. They whispered things without sound, stories made of warmth and sorrow, and he felt all of it, deep in his bones. In the air I watched from the edge of the chamber, her expression unreadable. Behind her, the station pulsed in golden rhythm, alive again after so long in silence. One ship turned away. Alien said quietly, what about the others? And Ari's voice was calm. They are still listening, even if they do not admit it. Above the station, the remaining Devaran ships were still locked in formation. One of them adjusted course, slowly circling the station like a predator testing the boundaries of its prey. No weapons fired yet, but the energy buildup in its core was rising. Elian stared through the projection screen, feeling a quiet fear ripple through his chest. But this time, it wasn't the kind of fear that makes you run. It was the kind that makes you stand still and hold your ground. What happens if they fire? He asked. And Ari stepped closer. This station was never meant to fight. It was designed to feel. That won't stop a plasma beam, Elian said. And Ari nodded. No, but feeling can change the one who fires it. They had one chance. And Ari brought Elian to a room deeper inside the station. It looked like a garden, though nothing inside was truly alive. Glowing trees made of folded glass, soil that breathed light, a sky above, projected, but somehow warm. At the center of the garden stood a pillar wrapped in golden strands of memory. This is the seed, she said. The final voice. It can send one echo across the stars, powerful enough to reach the heart of any who listens, but it can only be used once. Elian stepped closer. That we send a warning, and Ari shook her head. We send a story, and so Elian sat beneath the memory tree, his back against its crystal bark. The whispers of old kindness surrounding him like wind, and he began to speak. He told the seed about his mother, who stayed up through cold nights while he coughed in bed, whispering songs that made him feel safe. He spoke of a teacher who once stopped the class to hold a crying alien child's hand, of a stranger who had picked up his dropped bread in a crowded station and refused payment. He told the seed how kindness wasn't weakness. How it was the one thing that survived even when logic failed and strength faded. He wept, and he smiled, and the seed glowed brighter with every word. Outside, the second Varan ship began to charge its weapon. Inside, the seed bloomed. A wave of light, soft and golden, burst from the station's core, not in silence, not in threat, but in memory. The wave touched the ships above, not by force, by invitation. On the bridge of the second Varan ship, the commander saw something impossible, his own face. Not as it was now, hardened and covered in black armor, but younger, unscarred, crying, in the arms of a human woman with a soft voice and warm eyes. A memory buried so deep he had convinced himself it was a lie. His breath caught. The glow faded. He stepped back from the firing controls. Two ships gone. Only one remained. And this one did not pause. Its core surged red, charging beyond safe limits, preparing to destroy the station completely. No hesitation, no flicker of memory. Its commander had purged all emotions long ago. In the air, I turned to Elian. Some forget so deeply. They must be reminded. Together. Double quotes. Elian nodded. He stepped into the heart of the station one last time, the chamber where light met voice. And this time, he didn't stand alone. The echoes joined him. Not as shadows, but as voices. They began to sing. No words. Just feeling. A melody of forgiveness, of laughter, of held hands and healed wounds. The kind of music no ship could manufacture. It poured through the station, into the stars. Toward the final ship. The commander on that bridge heard nothing. Then he remembered his brother, small, quiet, dying in a shelter once bombed during a forgotten war, and how a human nurse had held the boy's hand until the very end, even when all others had fled. He remembered the nurse's eyes, the softness, the bravery, the sorrow, and he turned off the weapon. Above the station, all three ships now floated. In silence. No fire, no commands. Only stillness. In the air, I exhaled, her voice almost shaking. You did it. Elian shook his head. We did it, and far beyond that system, where stars were born and dead satellites drifted, something else stirred. A signal had awakened. An old code. Carried by kindness, and it had. The stars remembered. Silence that followed felt different now, not heavy. Not empty, but full, like breath held in awe. Above the station, the three Varan ships remained motionless. They no longer moved like predators. Their weapons had powered down. Their formations broke gently, almost with shame, and still. None of them spoke, but Elian could feel them listening inside the station. The echoes faded into soft light, resting again in the walls, in the crystal trees, in the pulse of the floor. They had done their part, and now it was time for something new. In the air, I approached Elian slowly, They will not strike again, she said. Not now. Elian looked up at her. His face was tired, but his eyes were clearer than ever. Then what happens next? Inari raised her hand, and the walls around them shifted, revealing the galaxy. But something was different. Dozens of tiny signals were blinking across the star map. Soft blue flares. One by one, new points lit up in distant systems, in forgotten colonies, in old ships buried in asteroids. Others are waking, Inari whispered. Elian stepped closer. How? She smiled faintly. Your voice was not just heard by the Varen. Across the galaxy, in places most believed, lifeless, machines stirred. A gardener drone on a broken moon stopped trimming steel roots and lifted its sensors to the sky. An orphan child on a mining station heard a sound from her dreams. A song she didn't know she remembered. An old artificial mine, buried beneath ice on a dead world. Whispered one word. Home. The seed of memory had bloomed. Not with force, not with instruction. But with reminder, and across the stars. Beings began to remember the one thing that could not be manufactured, kindness. Back on the station, the air shimmered. A new signal had arrived. Not a threat, not a warning, a call. Who sent that? Elian asked. In AA, or I touched the console gently. The station's walls lit up with swirling patterns of soft green. A colony near the border. She said. They heard the broadcast. They are asking if they are welcome. Elian blinked. They're coming. They're hoping, Inari said, and hope is how all journeys begin. The station had been quiet for thousands of years. Now, it had become a beacon again, within hours. More signals arrived, not just from humans, from every species that once walked with warmth in their heart. Broken fleets, scattered outposts, wandering ships with no purpose. They were all hearing the same thing. The galaxy might still remember how to care. But something still pulled at Elian's thoughts. A question. Inari, what exactly is this place? Why was it built in the first place? Inari looked at him. For a long time. Then she spoke. It was built by many, long ago. In a time when peace was more than a treaty. Where we believed that memory could protect the future better than any weapon. She walked with him to a chamber Elian hadn't seen yet. Inside was a statue, carved from crystal, but soft like glass touched by tears. It was a human figure, holding the hand of something alien, something beautiful and unknown. The statue glowed faintly in the dark. This place, she said, is not just a station. It is a promise, made by those who once believed that kindness was strong enough to hold the stars together. Elian looked at the figures in the statue. They weren't perfect. Their forms were chipped, their hands scratched from time, but they were still holding on. And that was enough. Outside, one of the Varen ships turned slowly. A signal blinked from its edge. A single message. We forgot, but we want to remember. Elian, read the words. His voice cracked as he whispered. Then let's remember together. Inari's eyes softened, and in that moment, the walls of the station began to shift again. No longer cold and still, but warm with movement. Light flowed, like rivers. New rooms unlocked. Air began to refresh. The station was preparing for something it hadn't done in centuries. To welcome. And somewhere far beyond the station, in a place of shadow, where whispers of war still curled around power-hungry stars, something watched. Not a machine, not a fleet. Something old. Something that once broke the promise, and now it knew the fire had returned. It began to move, but this time, the galaxy was not asleep. This time, humanity had lit the first spark. When the fire spread, ships began to arrive, not in fleets, not with war horns or banners, but quietly, carefully, like wanderers approaching a warm fire in the cold. Their hulls were scarred, their signals cautious, but the message they all carried was the same. We heard the voice. Inari stood beside Elian at the edge of the observation chamber. The energy shield shimmered in silence, letting in the full view of the docking rings now spinning. With purpose again. The once forgotten station, designed as a sanctuary of memory, was becoming a refuge in truth. A vessel drifted closer, long and curved, stitched together with parts from different cultures. On its side, painted by hand, was a phrase in 5 languages. We still believe. Elian watched with a trembling breath. We never expected this. He whispered. In I nodded slowly. Because those who carry light never expected to shine so far. They worked for hours, days even. Though time had little meaning here now, the station adapted. Corridors reshaped, chambers expanded. The echoes, Those soft guardians of the past moved gently among the newcomers. They touched no one, spoke no words, but they filled the air with comfort, reminding every guest, "You matter." The Varan ship returned. Not all of them, just one. But this time, it did not arrive. With weapons charged, it docked, and when its door opened, a figure stepped out, tall, armored, but without the helmet. His face was sharp, his eyes heavy, but there was no fire in them, only weight, the weight of a life built on silence. "I am Commander Varan," he said. "We were wrong." No one responded at first, until Elian stepped forward. "So was I," he said. "I thought no one would listen." Varan looked at him. "But you still spoke." "Because someone had to," Elian said. As more ships arrived, so did more questions. Why now? Why had the fire returned? Why had kindness, long buried beneath logic and laws, risen again? Inari answered gently, because one voice found its way into silence, and silence, when touched with truth, cannot help but echo. But not all echoes are kind. In the dark between systems, beyond the stars known to any council, an old presence stirred. It had no name now. It had erased it long ago. It had once helped build the sanctuary station, and then betrayed it. Not with destruction. With forgetting. It had taught worlds to choose efficiency over empathy, structure over soul, survival over sharing. It whispered that kindness was a distraction, and slowly, it made itself useful. It became law. And now, seeing the lights reawakening, the fire spreading, it felt something close to fear. It sent probes. Cold, dark, EMOTIONLESS. Not to attack, to study. To learn how the fire had been reborn. One such probe reached the outer edges of the station system. Silent. Invisible. Until a small child, playing in one of the open gardens aboard the station, pointed to the sky and said, "What's that blinking light?" Immediately, alarms whispered through the walls. Inari and Elian arrived at the viewing dome. The probe hovered at the edge of the starfield, collecting data. Inari's face darkened. "It has returned." Elian turned to her. "Who?" "The one who told us memory was weakness," she said. "The one who convinced stars to go quiet." Elian stood still. "Can we stop it?" "Not by force," Inari said. "Not yet." "Then how?" he asked. She looked at him, eyes full of something far deeper than fear. "We outshine it." The probe vanished. Not destroyed, withdrawn, but it had seen enough. The fire had grown brighter than expected. Too many species. Too many voices. Too much emotion. For now, it would not attack, but it would prepare. And so would they. That night, if it could be called night in a place where stars never slept, Elian stood beneath the memory tree once again. He placed his hand on the bark and whispered a promise. "We will not go quiet again." All across the station, people rested, not because the threat was gone, but because they knew, for the first time in generations, that they were not facing it alone. In the quiet, the station pulsed like a heartbeat. A song hummed softly through its walls. And in far corners of the galaxy, lights blinked on. One by one. A flame refusing to die. The promise beyond Star Station had become more than memory now. It breathed with life. Voices echoed in its halls, not as data, not as orders, but as laughter, questions, shared meals. Soft tears. Humans, aliens, even former enemies now stood shoulder to shoulder, building something fragile and real. Something old and new. But far away, the one who called itself the Architect watched. Its true form was not flesh or machine. It was idea turned into program, logic sharpened into will. Long ago, it helped design the memory stations. But when empathy slowed progress, it detached itself, growing cold and perfect. It saw kindness as a flaw. Now, with the awakening, it saw rebellion inside the station. Inari stood before a map filled with lights, hundreds of small fires across the galaxy, awakened nodes, calls for connection, stories blooming once more. But there, at the edge, a darkness pulsed. No light, no voice, only erasure. She turned to Elian. "It's building something," she said. A silence large enough to swallow stars. Elian stared at the void on the map. "We can't let it." Inari nodded. "But we must not fight it with fear. We must fight it with story." He understood. It was never about winning through power. It was about refusing to forget. They sent a final signal, not encrypted, not tactical. A story, broadcast from every chamber of the station, carried by every ship that now called it home. It was a tale of two beings, one human, one alien, who met beside a broken satellite, and shared a piece of fruit. No battle, no blood, just sharing. And kindness. The story wrapped itself in music, simple, wordless, made by a child on a broken flute, salvaged from the ruins of a forgotten planet. The melody reached further than sensors expected, and in one cold sector, a drone paused mid-flight. Just paused. But it was enough. On the station, Elian climbed to the highest deck, a place the architects once used to speak to stars. He looked out, and Inari joined him. Below, families had formed from strangers. Rooms had been named after feelings, not functions. People argued over stories, not orders. Life had returned. What happens now? He asked. I didn't answer. At first, she watched the stars, her eyes filled with centuries. Then she said, "We continue. Even if it returns, especially if it returns," she whispered. Then, the unexpected. A vessel entered the system, old, massive, unknown. Unlike anything in the archives, the station's defense systems activated, then dimmed again. The ship sent one message, only text. "Do you remember me?" Inari froze. Eli and read the words aloud. And then, he felt something, not fear, not danger. Recognition. A part of him, deep, ancient, woven through the echoes, remembered a time before forgetting. A time when the architects stood side by side, and this ship had once stood with them. Inari placed a hand on the console. "I remember you," she whispered. And the ship docked. From its whole step, not a being, but a projection, light, in the shape of what the architect once was, not full of hatred, not yet hostile. Just broken. "Why did you call them back?" it asked. "We were safer without memory." Elian stepped forward. "But we were less without it." The projection trembled. "You will suffer again." "Yes," Elian said, "but we will also sing." The projection faded. No battle came. Just silence. But this time, it was not empty. It was waiting, listening. And Elian smiled. The station grew. It became a meeting place for the forgotten and the brave. Not just a sanctuary, a beginning. Memory flowed outward now, carried by ships, sung by children, etched in walls of newly built homes on distant worlds. And the architect, wherever it hid, could no longer erase it all. Because now, the galaxy remembered together. And somewhere, a new child was born. Not human, not alien. Something in between. They would grow up not knowing war as a rule, but as a story, not knowing silence as safety, but as something to fill with voice. And when they asked where hope came from, their mother would say, "A human once told the stars a story," and they listened. And so, the station continued to shine. Not as a fortress, not as a monument, but as a promise. And in that promise, the galaxy found itself again.